So I've put out a couple videos now for Luna and the UF8 and how it takes Luna to the next level. Now I did put out a review of just the UF1. If you want to check that video out, click the link at the top of the screen. But this video is going to be entirely about the new workflow that I've created between the UF8 and the UF1 and Luna. Now before we get started, I am going to be giving out my UF8 and UF1 template for free. So if you want to pick that up, there's a link in the description. It'll take you to my store where you can find UAD presets, you can find Luna mix templates, you can book one-on-one time with me directly. It's a great way to support the channel. Alternatively, if you're just trying to see the workflow and you're contemplating picking up a UF1, I have left an affiliate link for the UF1 in the description as well. So if you decide to pick one up, it greatly helps the channel. It allows me to do more videos like this. It allows me to review new devices, all that kind of stuff. So any support is much appreciated. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I'm very curious to know what your thoughts are on this new workflow. So let's dive into it. Okay, this is like my third time trying to film this and my B camera isn't working with me. So I've kind of got the camera on the tripod and the tripod's totally in the way of my seat. So if my arm movements look a little weird, that's why. But we're gonna power through and hopefully explain this entire thing seamlessly so you guys really get a sense for how great of a workflow this actually is with the new UF1, UF8, and Luna. So when I first got the UF8, the first thing that kind of stuck out to me in my mind is if you have custom commands across the top, you kind of have to remember the order that they are in. And so to make that easier, my brain likes to try to mirror what I see on screen to the physical real world as much as possible. A great example of this is the quick keys. So in the top left-hand corner of the screen, you can create a new track. You can create a new bus, so it's create new track, create new instrument, create new bus, and it mirrors exactly what you see on screen, as well as where you'd go on the device to do that command. Additionally, Luna's based off of workflows, and previously I had my workflows across the top, so I had 1 through 4, which is also the same order as the workflows that you'll find across the top of the screen. So you've got record, MIDI, edit, and then mix, and that was how it was. That hasn't really changed. However, there is a page 5 now, and on page 5, you'll see markers across the top. And I'm gonna get into all of this, how I use this in just a second, but I really still wanna just explain the methodology behind creating this workflow. Now, since the UF1 does kind of overlap with the UF8 in some of the parameters, for example, your directional buttons here, they are the same command on each device. So I really wanted to eliminate as much overlap as possible so that each device could do its own thing. Another great example is the automation section. These buttons are only dedicated for automation, whereas on the master controller here, if you throw it into shift mode, now at the bottom you'll see read, write, trim. I see that as kind of being redundant, right? So I'm never ever going to throw it into shift mode so that I can access automation parameters here. I'm just simply going to use this section of this UF8 for that reason. Another area of overlap was navigation. So yeah, sure, I guess I could leave that on navigation and navigate through my session that way, but hey, I've got the UF1 and it has this amazing jog wheel, so I'm going to use it for that, which means that I can now leave this channel encoder into focus mode. So if I have a plugin, I can just leave that up and control the parameter really quickly if I need to. And then I can leave this channel encoder into channel mode where I can just cycle through all of my channels. I find that to be really, really useful. So if you're following me, this is dedicated, 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 and even this section has kind of sort of become a dedicated section for the commands, and we're gonna go through what they do as well. And to go through all of this, I really wanted to just show you what it would look like on a blank project. So in a blank project, the first thing that you're probably gonna do is create a scratch track. So we'll go up here, create scratch track, and call it scratch. Sweet. We do need to select where our input's coming from, so I'm going to choose high Z1. Now the very next thing that you'd probably do would be arm it or turn on input monitoring, which is record ready and then input monitoring. That's how you kind of see it in this screen. So what I've done is made that a dedicated master section feature, so you don't have to flip through any of these shortcut keys to try to find that function. And it goes left and right. So that's my first 2 things in this bank of custom keys. First one is record ready. Next one's input monitor. Now the next thing you'd probably do is play a scratch pass of your track so you can build out your markers. So let's do that. So we're going to start recording. Testing 1, 2, and 3. This is my song. La 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 la. Nice. So now that I've got my track there, it's my scratch pass, we know we're gonna get rid of it and record over it. We're done there. But let's say I need to go to the mixer, I need to see something, right? Quick key number one here is always, the first thing you're probably gonna do is swap between your two views. Really handy to have. Another like screen related dedicated function is your loop. The loop button used to be up here, but now you've got a dedicated section for it, and the same thing with a click. And both of those functions are kind of a master control section function, so I didn't really want to map them anywhere else other than there. So if number one is some sort of GUI related function, number two probably is going to be a GUI related function as well, and it's a dedicated plugin hider or window hider, right? So I can leave this window open and press number two, and then if I need to bring it back up, I'm good. I need to access a parameter and change it real quick, I've got it. It's easy. So you can fly through your session views really quickly that way. Of course, this is also a dedicated master fader, so if I flip it into master mode, now I have access to that. Something else that you might do from the very beginning of your project is create markers. And before I had just a simple marker button here where you just open up the prompt and you'd type in what marker you wanted. But what I've now done is on page 5, I've got macros that type that out for you. So your first section, right, it might be coming in at this intro. And you can see it just creates one for you, entitles it, and escapes out of it for you. You've got verse, you've got a pre-chorus, a chorus, turnaround. You might go back and do a verse again, then another pre-chorus. You get the idea. So that's kind of how that works, and it's really handy. You do it at the beginning of your session, then you move on, which is why I left it on page 5 rather than page 1, because again, visually on screen, you see these workflows 1 through 4. If you're on workflow 1, right, record workflow, you kind of want your soft keys on that as well. So one more thing on markers. On the first page, because you're still in that first section of your project, I've also still kept the new marker prompt, so if you wanted to make something very specific, you can. And then I've also left sends and cues up, because again, if you're on the early side, you might access your headphone mixes. And so to do that, right, you would just hold this button down. It says pick a cue. You could pick a cue 1 or pick a cue 2. You could do it here as well. In this case, let's choose headphone cue number 1. And I could now build a headphone mix for my artist by flipping the faders. Really easy. And actually I could do the same thing for cue 2 as well. Just hold it down again, pick cue number 2, and you can see on my screen that I can just create mixes that way. It's super easy that way, really accessible, and I can bounce back and forth between them real easily. That's awesome. I love that. And I could do the same thing with sends as well, but we don't have any buses. And then to escape out, let's just hit pan and make sure you hit flip. But now I'm back to controlling the actual faders. I really like that feature. So say we've got our headphone mixes dialed in, we've built our markers, we can arm our tracks. Let's say we want to go from a scratch track and we like the way we've got it set up, but now we actually want to do a real pass. We can create a new version, and let's go ahead and record. Here we go. This is our real version. Our make-believe real version. We can then version down or version up through the different versions if we needed to maybe record over a previous pass, etc. You get the idea. Now, a lot of times when I'm tracking, if I'm doing a vocal, I might end up doing a BGV or a background vocal right after that. And so it might be the exact same settings, but I don't want to bring all of the audio with it. So what I would do is duplicate the track without content, which you could do by right-clicking and choosing that. But if you've already selected the track, why not just hit one button? And then there you go. Now you've got a duplicated track. Another thing is, let's go back to this track and we'll go to a previous version. Let's just say you wanted to, punch right here. In that case, you might want to have a little bit of a count off. And so that's why I've included this function as well. During your project setup, what you can do is actually also create like pre-roll for that. So if you wanted like a 4-bar pre-roll, this one function automatically adds the pre-roll and post-roll that you've selected. This is really useful if you're recording yourself and you don't want to like immediately jump into playing and speed up or slow down your performance, etc. One thing to note though, it's a little quirky because it's a keyboard command. It's going to remember this relationship. So if you have count in bars, turned off and you have your pre-roll turned on, if you use this command, it's going to keep the relationship of whatever that is. And you can see it's now alternating the count in on, but the pre-roll off. So to fix that at the beginning of your session, just make sure that they are the same, and then that'll work as it should. And of course you got plugin GUI toggle, but I've also mapped it to number 2 here. I'm probably gonna change that in the near future, but I'll email everyone when I do, right? So we're on tracking. We've moved on from our marker phase. We're now in our tracking phase. We can move this one over as well. And with it, you'll find abort recording. So let's say we're recording and we're like, yeah, this take is terrible. I don't like it. I can just stop the recording and then I don't have to worry about deleting it. Now the next page goes into a bit of MIDI editing and a bit of audio editing as well. But I really like these next 2 pages. Once we've moved on to that MIDI workflow, there's a few cool things. Visually, I've got grid up or grid down. And so you can see here, I'm getting more divisions or less divisions. And that's depending on grid up, more divisions, grid down, less. Pretty straightforward. And then I can also toggle snap on or off. I like having snap off when I'm trying to create fades and create, very specific edit movements. I like having that off because sometimes snap is like a pain in the butt if you're trying to do something and there's like an in-between area. But turning it on also has its perks. Now you can edit to the grid and just have it snap. So it's nice, and I can leave that up and still be in MIDI view, or I can still be in audio view. And speaking of views, I've now got 2 more views that you can cycle through. So you've got lane view up or lane view down. And what is lane view? Okay, well, let's talk about it. So if I forward through lane view, I've now got warps. And let's just say I wanted to quantize this audio. I can open up my quantize menu and tell it, hey, quantize it to the grid on 4th notes or quarter notes. I wouldn't necessarily have to open up this quantize menu, but I could. These next 3 commands here are kind of more related to MIDI, which is why it's in the second workflow rather than audio recording. We're now in MIDI recording workflow. If you have notes selected, you can change the pitch of those notes by an octave, which is really handy because on the keyboard, just pressing up and down will move those notes by a semitone. So now you've got both shortcuts really quickly. And then of course, split note obviously is going to split your note down the middle. And then again, lane views, that also works in the MIDI mode, which is really handy, really nice. And this is a great way to kind of just cycle through any sort of automation parameters as well. Now, after that, on this device, you've got a really cool dedicated workflow for comping. So you can cycle through your versions really quickly. Say you want to copy part of it, you can copy it, you can paste it, and you can actually really almost get into like a 2-handed workflow. And then if you keep your mouse handy, you can highlight what you want, copy it, move it over, paste it. You get the idea. It's a little awkward because again, my tripod's in the way, and I'm not actually working on a real project. This is just to kind of demonstrate everything. After that, you've got some functions related to the project. You've got consolidate clip, which I love this feature. So say you highlight this, you can just hit consolidate, and now bam, there you go. You've consolidated that. You can also export that as well. So at the end of your session, you've consolidated your waves and you want to deliver just the raw tracks, press export clip, and then there you go. That's going to do that. Of course, you can also bring up the Mixdown tab right from there. It's really cool. Final page is creating a save, so you can save a bookmark. The next thing is save a new version. So like, let's say you're doing a remix of the entire project. You hit save new version, it's actually going to bring up that prompt for that. That's almost a hidden menu item now because there is no save new version. It's just save bookmarks. So you kind of have to know the keyboard shortcut for that. On page 3 here, you kind of get more into the audio editing world. So let's say right here, you want to throw a split. Now I've got starting fades and ending fades. So say you want to fade up to this point, you do a starting fade, and say you want to fade out to a certain point. Doesn't really matter where, but you can create fades that way. I used to do like a Fang Fingers thing on the keyboard where I'll do like Command F, which is cool, but you kind of have to like highlight a specific point and then press F, and it just kind of became wonky. Whereas here, if you turn off snap, you can just click wherever you want and add an ending fade, or you can add a beginning fade, which is like so much faster to do it that way, which is why I like having access to snap. Of course, you can create new groups. So say I want to select these two tracks and create a new group. I can name it whatever I want, and then I can toggle groups on or off. So if I have groups off, I can select each track, make a change, turn the groups back on, and now they're going to work in tandem. Turn them off again. I can move just one of them at a time, pan them independently. You get the idea, turn them back on. Now they're going to keep their relationship, whatever that may be. Now, another really interesting thing is resize session. So let's say I have a bunch of tracks. I can completely resize the session. This makes a lot more sense if I have a ton of tracks, but I think you get the idea. And then the cool thing over here is that these kind of two pages you can just kind of toggle between, and it's a really, really handy tool in combination with pages with 2 and 3. So now you're kind of in your mixing workflow. And of course, you've got access to bus spill, which is pretty nice. Again, you can access your sends and pick a send across the top. Again, we don't have any buses, but that's where you would do that. Another thing is delete track. I've got that command here. So if I just don't want this, I can just, real quickly delete it. It was in a group, so it deleted both of them. Let's undo that. Turn groups off. Select just this track, delete it. There you go. Kind of moving over here, right? You've got consolidate and export clip. We've talked about that. New versions, and then there's a whole bunch of other pages that I haven't done anything with just yet. But overall, the whole workflow is very linear. So you're probably going to start out on page 5. You're going to start out on page 1 over here. Then you're going to go to recording. The recording phase, you might go to MIDI editing phase. Then you might go to your audio editing phase. Maybe you go to comping and you have that up there as well. Then you're gonna go to your mixing phase, and now that's where you're gonna probably stay on grid size, snap on off, or you could page over to consolidate and export clips if you're in mixdown mode. Again, this section has its own function, this section has its own function, individual functions, own function, specific function. Why don't I show that too? Why don't we create like a bunch of tracks? There you go. So you got a bunch of tracks there. Now you can see we're cycling through them. Very useful. And then you still have your navigation functions. Very cool. If you want to navigate between the markers, you can just use the left and right arrows. If you want to make the session bigger or smaller, you can do so. And then here's where you can see the resize session function. Course bank will still bank through your tracks, which is cool. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. But I do like the channel encoder option. And then again, if you're coming here and you're looking at one of the tracks, you want to arm it, it's always available over here. You never have to cycle through anything, and that works with both audio tracks or MIDI tracks. You've always got access to loop on or off. You've always got access to click on or off. You can always jump to each different view in Luna, and you can hide your plugins, hide your wives, hide your kids, because we're compressing everything in here. And then the highlight of it all, right, SSL meter. Where this starts to come into play is if you actually have the SSL meter plugin loaded. And if you do, you can just cycle through your modes, and then there you go. You have that up on your screen over there, or you can go back to the shortcut mode. You just cycle through it. And then of course you can cycle through the modes up here as well. That's pretty nice. If you hold it down, then you can very easily jump over to DAW mode rather than cycling, but cycling's faster in my opinion. Pretty cool, very cool actually. If you have both of these devices and you pick up the preset and you load it up, I guarantee you'll get a feel for it, and it's very intuitive to work two-handedly. So hopefully you guys like it. I know that this was quite a dense walkthrough. There's not really an easy way to show all of the functionality without just kind of getting dense and going through each individual item. Another thing to note is if you use the SSL 360 mixer, you can control those parameters if you put it into that mode. You have to do it on both devices. So this device needs a layer dedicated to that, which I have done, layer 3, layer 1. I believe that is not part of the preset. That's just something that you have to select yourself. I could be wrong on that, but either way. And then over here, you have to hold the 360 layer down and then kind of cycle that way. But I'm pretty sure I densely covered absolutely everything about this workflow. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I am just, honestly, it feels so good to work with two hands, use the faders, use the tools like I would on a console. Remembering keyboard commands is a huge pain in the butt, but having them across both devices is awesome. And I'm sure that I will update this as I go along. All right, so there you have it. That's the workflow. It took me a little bit of time to get used to just how many custom key commands I could really program. And I also had to kind of get clever about what I mapped, how I mapped it, where I mapped it, to try to make this as linear of a workflow as possible. Again, if you like the workflow, you want it, and you have a UF8 or a UF1, go to my website, thestevekinney.com. That's where you can find all the different ways to support the channel. If there's something on this channel you want to see covered, your time to shine's in the comments. Let me know what you want to see covered. That's how I'm going to be able to make that happen. Outside of that, thanks so much for watching, guys. Cheers. Also, let's go New York Giants.